Hey gang, it's JC, and this is the Daily Dose for Wednesday, February 9th, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. Archives, top of the page, you get the Wayback Machine, and just all sorts of cool stuff. We loaded up the website with old TV newscasts and weathercasts and old commercials from 25 years ago, and it's all up there in the archives, and you should look at it because it's actually pretty cool. So we have all that, and then we run eye candy along the bottom, and every day we change that. That's either a cool picture or some sort of viral video or something like that. We call it eye candy, and again, we are on the Big 550 KTRS every weekday morning, starting at 10 in the morning, going until 1 in the afternoon. And Trish Gazelle, Trish's Trash, is back. She's on with us. Eric Mink on Tuesdays, Joe Marlotti, professional comedian, on Thursdays, and Smash joins us every Friday. We're going to have a special show on Friday. We do this thing called Mixtape Friday every Friday, but we're going to do something a little different this week, and we'll tell you about that a little bit later on. Normally, I save the sort of, this day in history stuff for the end of the Daily Dose, but I'm starting off with it today because it was 47 years ago today. That was one of those days that I just don't think I'll ever forget. And, for weeks and weeks, my sister, who is 5 years older than me, Nancy, high up there in Aurora, Nancy was playing these records, and the radio station I was listening to in Chicago, WLS, the Big 89, were playing these records, and everybody was all excited, and the Beatles were coming to America. And it was on this date, February 9th, 1964, that my sister sat my ass down in front of the TV and said, "Watch this." And so we all sort of huddled around at the Ed Sullivan Show. I still remember Soupy Sales was on the show that night. Somewhere in my archives, matter of fact, I should probably go back and watch it. I have the original Ed Sullivan Show, the whole thing with the commercials and everything. They put a DVD out a couple of years ago, and it's just amazing to watch. But about 73 million people were watching. The story is that a stagehand backstage at the Ed Sullivan Show said something to Paul McCartney along the lines of, are you nervous? And Paul said, no. And he said, well, you ought to be. There's 80 million people watching. Well, it turned out to be 73 million people. That theater at the time held 728 people. When David Letterman redid the theater to begin broadcasting his show when he moved from NBC over to CBS, they got it down to I think it's about 488. But back then, 728 seats in that theater. They had 50,000 requests for tickets for that show. And you really wonder where those people are, because you remember those girls with those horn-rimmed glasses, that came out, they were like this, and they came out like at points, like Batman or something. And you wonder where all those people are right now. But it was 47 years ago. I was 10 years old. And it was just one of those remarkable, remarkable days in my life. And I'm sure it was, if you were around, for you too. Now, interestingly, back in 1998, David Letterman's people said, we're going to be doing these theme shows. And every Friday night for about 6 weeks, we're going to fly in audiences from specific cities. They did Indianapolis, they did New Orleans, they did a couple of other cities. And in the spring of 1998, it was St. Louis's turn. And in fact, it was very, very cool because they brought all these people in. It was 3 plane loads of people. We were able to give away, I think we gave away something like 100 or 150 of those seats. And, I mean, they just took care of everything. Letterman's people just basically wrote a fat check. And 3 planes, 3 charters, showed up at Lambert International, and everybody loaded up, and we flew to New York, and they put us at the Manhattan Hilton, and Rupert G. and Larry Bud Melman, Sirajul Mujibur, and those people were all sort of hanging around, and then they walked us. They walked us. Now I was with a TV crew. I was with Channel 4 at the time, obviously CBS, so they sent a camera crew up there to cover this entire thing. And they walked us a couple of blocks from the Hilton over to the Ed Sullivan Theater and walked us in, and I was setting up the camera, the whole thing. And so they basically said, okay, we're going to be letting these people in a few minutes. I said, well, I would like to get the shot of them entering the Ed Sullivan Theater. Can I go in there and set up with the camera so when they come in, we'll see everybody coming into the theater as opposed to just standing out in the foyer in the lobby area? And they said, sure. So we set up with the camera, and I'm standing there, and for about 15 minutes or so, it was just me in the theater with the camera crew and nobody else. The place was empty. And I was just sort of looking around. I'd watched the show for so many times. And I had been to Letterman's show when he was at NBC a couple of times, but never been inside the Ed Sullivan Theater. So I'm in there by myself, and I'm just sort of looking at everything. And I'm like, oh, there's Dave's desk. Oh, there's where Paul and the band is. And there's where all the seats are and all that. And then it just suddenly hit me. It just like hit me. Oh, my God. That's the stage where the Beatles performed. And I just sort of went over there. I was in the first row of the audience, which is a sunken audience, a row there. And I just sort of reached out and I put my hand on the stage and just, it was like, one of those electrical moments that, again, you'll never forget the rest of your life. And I just put my hand on that stage and thought to myself, the Beatles performed right here on February 9th, 1964. And then I started to get a rush of emotion about all the other things that I remembered seeing on that Ed Sullivan stage. And the Doors and George Carlin for the very first time. And, comedian Robert Klein and Joan Rivers and all the musical acts, various things that I remember. Even Topo Gigio, the little puppet mouse. So it was quite a day. I mean, that whole trip, when we sent, almost 500 people from St. Louis to be in the audience of The Late Show with David Letterman. But that Ed Sullivan Theater experience and being in there by myself and just sort of, pawing around on that stage, it was just one of those things I will never forget. But anyhow, 47 years ago today, I was 10 years old, the Beatles made their American debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. All right, speaking of music, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has announced the presenters for their induction ceremony next month. Rob Zombie is going to induct Alice Cooper. Elton John is going to induct Leon Russell. Paul Simon will do the same for Neil Diamond. Neil Young will induct Tom Waits. John Legend will bring in Dr. John, and Bette Midler will induct Darlene Love. The ceremony is in New York City on March 14th. It'll air a week later on March 20th on the Fuse network, which is maybe the only less obscure or more obscure network than the place that Keith Olbermann is going to. Victoria Beckham is pregnant, and she's reportedly in talks to pose naked for Vogue. Fantasia. All right, so yesterday on the showgram, on the Big 550 KTRS, we have the lovely Diana DeGarmo, who's in town for the next 2 weeks at the Fox Theater doing 9 to 5. She was absolutely delightful, by the way. And I'll tell you a little story about that interview. We had her on the air. We were out in the lobby talking to her for couple of minutes before she came in. And then we brought her in, and we had a few minutes to talk before we went on. And then we had about a 16, 17-minute interview with Diana DeGarmo. And then when it was all over with, and we went to commercials, then we had some pictures taken and all that. And she had talked a lot about her mother. Now, this is a kid. This kid's 23 years old, season 3 American Idol, runner-up to Fantasia. So she's, obviously touring since last September with 9 to 5, and she's doing the Dolly Parton role in the whole thing. We have a lot of questions, and she kept talking about her mother. And we had so many things. It's just one of the things when you're limited by time in an interview situation on a radio station. Sometimes you just don't get to all the questions that you would like to ask. So when we were taking pictures and everything, I said, you talked a lot about your mother. What does your dad do? Because her mother's a lawyer, and she sort of stammered for a minute. And then said, well, he's actually, he's dead. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Did it happen recently? She goes, yeah, just a couple of weeks ago. It's like, oh my gosh. Do you mind me asking what happened? And they live outside of Atlanta. And about a month ago, do you remember hearing that they had this massive ice and snowstorm in Atlanta? And of course, down there, they don't really have any equipment to remove ice and snow because it's freaking Atlanta. Apparently, her father, 67 years old, her father had a heart attack, and the EMT crews couldn't get to him because of the bad weather, and he just died. Well, anyhow, she was a sweetheart, by the way. And this kid at 23 has more poise and professionalism and just more self-confidence than I think anybody I've run into at that age in a long time. So now you got the Fantasia story. And Fantasia, of course, the big splash, season 3, wins American Idol and then sort of disappears. I don't know, put out an album or two or something like that. And then, she has one of these suicide attempts. She survives it. And like a week later, she looks fine, full hair and makeup. Seems like nothing's wrong with her promoting her new album. And you you hate to be like this. You hate to be so skeptical that you're wondering if somebody was so morally bankrupt that they would actually sink so low as to attempt suicide or fake a suicide attempt or something like that, just so that a week later you could promote an album. So anyhow, Fantasia, it turns out, now has been impregnated by the married guy she tried to commit suicide over. There's your difference between Fantasia and somebody who's spectacular like Diana DeGarmo. So the next time you sort of laugh at the person who didn't win American Idol, came in second or third place, I don't know. I think some of those people have it more together than the people who have won. Bill O'Reilly predicted that his Super Bowl chat with President Obama would be seen by more people than any other interview that's ever been done in the history of mankind. Well, close, Bill, with 17 million viewers, and that's not nearly a record, but nice try. And sign of the times, I guess you can throw out your old cassette tapes. They are not coming back. According to the New York Times, not a single car model comes with the option for a factory-equipped cassette deck anymore. The last car to offer that was the 2010 Lexus SC430 Sports Coupe. The 2011s do not have that option. And I'm one of those people who, walk in public or text in private, but don't try to do this, and don't try to be texting and doing that sort of stuff while you're walking, because you walk into things. And earlier this week, a teenager in Australia was texting a friend while walking to his car at the top of a parking garage, didn't see the waist-high railing on the roof, and went right over, and he's dead. Lindsay Lohan back in court. She's going to go to jail. And that's all I've got for you today. JC's Eye Candy today is a great pair of pictures. And when I say pair, maybe I should use a different word. Everybody sort of went nuts over this Christina Hendricks from Mad Men. And men liked her because she had big knockers, and women liked her because she was sort of exotic, and she wasn't one of these skinny-ass little ex-supermodels who doesn't have any meat on her bones. So both men and women liked her. Well, we have a picture of the current Christina Hendricks from Mad Men, and then next to it we have a photo shoot that she did in Playboy magazine a couple of years ago, and it is very, very clear that all of that buxomness was surgically enhanced. So you look at the pictures and you tell me if it's possible for somebody to just suddenly grow those things. Nah, they're fake, and it's sort of depressing. But we still have Sofia Vergara, right? So there. All right, that's it. JC's Daily Dose for Wednesday, February 9, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. We'll talk to you every day, Monday through Friday from 10 to 1 on the Big 550 KTRS here in St. Louis. In the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later. Bye.